You're watching DX Recap, the place where we break down movies fast, clear, and spoiler-packed. Whether you missed it, forgot it, or just want a quick refresh, we've got you covered. Let's get into the story.
The movie opens aboard the International Space Station, where a team of astronauts is preparing for a mission that could change human history forever. A spacecraft called the Pilgrim is finally returning from Mars after a long journey through space. On board are precious soil samples collected from the Red Planet. Scientists believe these samples may contain the first-ever proof that life exists beyond Earth. The crew's mission is simple but incredibly important: intercept the Pilgrim and safely bring it aboard the station. However, things immediately take a dangerous turn. The returning capsule has been damaged during its journey and begins drifting off its intended course. If the astronauts fail to capture it, years of research and humanity's greatest chance at discovering alien life could be lost forever, with no time to waste. Astronaut Rory Adams prepares for a risky spacewalk. His job is to leave the safety of the station and operate a massive robotic arm from outside, using it to catch the incoming capsule before it drifts away. As Rory gets suited up, the atmosphere inside the station becomes tense. Every crew member rushes to their assigned position. Commander Ekaterina Golovkina and engineer Sho Murakami oversee the operation from the station's command center. Meanwhile, Station Dr. David Jordan carefully monitors Rory's vital signs, making sure everything remains stable during the dangerous mission. Standing beside David is lead scientist Hugh Derry, who watches nervously through a viewing window. After months of waiting, everything comes down to this single moment. Soon the astronauts spot the Pilgrim approaching. The damaged capsule races toward the station at high speed, and anxiety spreads throughout the crew. Outside, Rory carefully guides the robotic arm into position. Everyone watches in complete silence. Then, suddenly, the Pilgrim slams into the arm. The entire station violently shakes from the impact. Crew members are thrown backward as the structure jolts under the force of the collision. For a brief moment, nobody knows if Rory succeeded. Then the astronauts rush back to the viewing window, and what they see instantly fills them with relief. Rory caught it. The Pilgrim has been successfully secured. Cheers erupt throughout the station as smiles spread across every face. After all the tension, the mission has succeeded. Commander Ekaterina immediately contacts NASA, proudly announces that the Pilgrim capsule has safely arrived aboard the International Space Station. Humanity has officially taken its first step toward answering one of its oldest questions: are we alone in the universe? Soon afterward, Hugh begins examining the Martian samples inside the station's laboratory. Working carefully, he extracts material from one of the containers and places it beneath a microscope. At first, he notices something unusual buried within the sample. It appears to be an organism. The tiny life form looks almost fossilized, as if it has been dormant for an unimaginable amount of time. Hugh describes it as something resembling a primitive, single-celled organism. Excited by the discovery, he immediately begins trying to revive it. Unfortunately, nothing happens. The organism remains completely inactive, but Hugh refuses to give up, believing the creature may require conditions similar to those found on early Earth. He adjusts the environment inside the testing chamber. He recreates an atmosphere similar to Earth's Proterozoic era and introduces a special growth hormone. The crew watches closely, then something incredible happens. The organism moves. For a moment, nobody can believe what they're seeing. The tiny creature is alive. Hugh bursts into laughter as the realization hits him. They've done it. Humanity has officially discovered extraterrestrial life. The news spreads across Earth almost instantly. Television networks interrupt their broadcasts. Massive crowds gather to celebrate. People around the world watch in amazement as humanity enters a brand new era. Later, the astronauts participate in a live video call with students back on Earth. The children have been given a in-Sinalpha-time opportunity. They've been chosen to name the first alien organism ever discovered. After some discussion, one student proudly reveals their decision. The organism will be called Calvin. The crew smiles at the name, and Calvin officially becomes humanity's first known extraterrestrial life form. Once the celebration ends, life aboard the station returns to normal. Hugh and Rory spend time repairing plumbing systems while exchanging playful arguments. Elsewhere, quarantine specialist Miranda North performs a routine health check on David. She's concerned about him. David has spent an unusually long time aboard the station and is close to breaking the world record for the longest continuous stay in space. Miranda worries about the effects such a lengthy mission could have on his health, but David doesn't seem concerned. In fact, he admits he actually prefers living aboard the station. To him, space feels more like home than Earth ever did. The following day, the crew continues studying Calvin. What they discover is astonishing. The tiny organism has grown rapidly in an incredibly short amount of time. What was once a microscopic life form now consists of hundreds of cells and has already begun developing a neural network. As Hugh analyzes Calvin further, he uncovers something even more remarkable. Every single Calvin cell can perform every major biological function independently. Each cell functions as a muscle cell, a nerve cell, and even a photoreceptive cell, all at the same time. In other words, Calvin is unlike anything humanity has ever encountered. It is all brain, all muscle, and all eyes. The creature continues evolving at an alarming rate. Soon, Calvin develops small appendages and begins interacting with its surroundings. Fascinated by the alien's intelligence, Hugh attempts to communicate with it. The rest of the crew watches nervously as he plays with the rapidly evolving life form. While Hugh sees endless scientific possibilities, others are beginning to feel uneasy. Later that evening, the crew gathers for dinner. During the meal, Sho receives exciting news from Earth. His wife has gone into labor, not long afterward. Sho proudly introduces everyone to his newborn daughter through a video call. The station briefly fills with happiness as the crew celebrates the arrival of the newest member of Sho's family. Afterward, everyone returns to their personal routines. David conducts medical examinations on himself. Sho continues speaking with his family, and Hugh heads straight back to the laboratory, eager to spend more time studying Calvin. Several weeks pass, then suddenly the station is shaken by an alarm. The emergency alert sends everyone rushing into action. Rory, Miranda, and Hugh immediately head toward Calvin's laboratory. Once inside, Rory quickly identifies the source of the malfunction and repairs it. Hugh admits that he may have overlooked something that allowed the problem to occur in the first place. Miranda takes the opportunity to remind everyone how important containment procedures are. They still know very little about Calvin. Keeping the organism isolated must remain their top priority. Hugh doesn't like her attitude. He argues that Calvin shouldn't be treated like a disease, but Rory quickly pushes back. Calvin is an alien species, and Hugh is becoming far too emotionally attached to it. The disagreement ends without a resolution. Later, the crew notices another surprising development. After weeks of non-stop growth, Calvin has suddenly become dormant. The creature no longer moves. Miranda believes the laboratory malfunction may have triggered a defensive hibernation response. Honestly, she's relieved. Calvin had been growing much faster than anyone expected. This pause gives the crew valuable time to review and strengthen their containment protocols. One thing is made perfectly clear. Calvin and its laboratory must remain sealed at all times. Later, Hugh and Miranda continue discussing Calvin. Hugh remains convinced that studying the alien cells could revolutionize medicine. He believes Calvin may hold the key to curing diseases and healing countless medical conditions. Determined to continue his research, Hugh proposes waking the creature up. His solution is simple: a small electrical shock. Inside the laboratory, Hugh prepares the equipment and begins administering controlled shocks to Calvin. Nothing happens at first. Then suddenly, Calvin explodes back to life. Before anyone can react, the creature shoots forward and latches onto Hugh's hand. The electrical wand snaps apart. Everyone freezes. At first, Hugh tries to stay calm. He carefully pulls on his arm, attempting to free himself, but Calvin refuses to let go. Then the alien starts squeezing. Hugh immediately cries out in pain. The pressure grows stronger. His fingers begin bending into unnatural positions. One by one, Calvin folds them backward. Hugh starts screaming and desperately begs for help. Outside the containment chamber, the crew panics. They want to rush in and save him, but Miranda stops them. Allowing another crew member into danger could make the situation even worse. As the argument continues, Calvin tightens its grip even further. A horrifying crack echoes through the laboratory. The creature completely crushes Hugh's hand. Moments later, Hugh loses consciousness and drifts helplessly through the chamber, his hand left horribly mangled. But the nightmare isn't over. Inside its containment box, Calvin immediately begins searching for a way out. Using a sharp fragment from the broken electrical wand, the alien carefully punctures one of the protective gloves built into the enclosure. The barrier has been breached. The crew watches in disbelief. Then, to everyone's horror, Calvin escapes. The alien immediately spots a laboratory rat nearby. Without hesitation, it attacks. The creature wraps itself around the helpless animal and begins digesting it alive. Feeding and growing stronger, right before the crew's eyes. Meanwhile, Rory rushes into the lab to rescue Hugh. David manages to pull the injured scientist to safety, but before Rory can escape, he freezes. Calvin suddenly latches onto his leg. Panic spreads through the station. Thinking quickly, Rory grabs an oxygen candle and ignites it, hoping the intense heat will force the creature to release him. The gamble works. Calvin recoils from the flames and jumps off his leg, seeing an opportunity. Commander Ekaterina orders Rory to kill the alien before it escapes again. Armed with an incinerator, Rory begins hunting Calvin through the laboratory. The creature darts from corner to corner, hiding behind equipment and containers while Rory relentlessly pursues it with bursts of fire. For a moment, it looks like Rory has finally cornered the alien. Calvin appears trapped inside a storage container. Slowly, Rory approaches, but when he looks inside, the container is empty. Calvin was never there. Before Rory can react, the creature suddenly appears behind him. Then everything goes horribly wrong. Calvin launches itself directly onto Rory's face. The crew watches in horror as the alien forces its way into his mouth. Rory immediately begins choking. He struggles desperately for air, while everyone else can do nothing but watch from the other side of the sealed laboratory. Seconds later, Rory's body starts convulsing. Then blood erupts from his mouth. His lifeless body drifts through the laboratory as the crew stares in shock. The station has just lost another crew member, but Calvin isn't finished. The flames from Rory's incinerator trigger the station's fire suppression system, flooding the laboratory with suppressant gas. Moments later, Calvin emerges from Rory's body. Only now, the creature is almost unrecognizable. After feeding on both the lab rat and Rory, Calvin has grown dramatically larger, many times its original size. Realizing the alien might escape through the gas vents, Sho and Commander Ekaterina race to manually seal every opening. One by one, they close the valves. But as the final vent begins shutting, Calvin reaches it. To everyone's horror, the creature compresses its body and squeezes through the tiny gap just before the valve seals completely. The alien is loose once again. Desperate for help, Ekaterina attempts to send an emergency distress signal to NASA, but Sho discovers another problem. The transmission system has failed. If they want to contact Earth, someone will have to go outside and repair it manually. Without hesitation, Ekaterina volunteers. She suits up and exits the station. Upon reaching the communications transmitter, she quickly discovers the source of the malfunction. The unit has overheated. When she opens the nearby coolant chamber, she makes a disturbing discovery. It's empty. The coolant is gone. Back inside the station, Hugh, now conscious despite his injuries, suggests a terrifying possibility. Calvin may have consumed the coolant as a source of nourishment. As they discuss the theory, it suddenly becomes reality. Without warning, Calvin bursts out of the coolant chamber and attacks Ekaterina. The creature latches onto her suit as she desperately races back toward the airlock. At first, she believes she can make it. Then she notices liquid forming inside her suit. Her blood runs cold. Calvin has ruptured one of her coolant lines. The suit is slowly filling with liquid, and if it continues, she will drown. As she struggles toward the station, the coolant begins flooding her helmet. Her vision blurs. Breathing becomes impossible. Knowing she has only seconds left, Ekaterina launches herself toward the airlock. Inside, David rushes to help her, but Miranda warns him to be careful. Someone in that situation could panic and act irrationally. Ekaterina reaches the hatch. David desperately tells her to help unlock the airlock. But instead of opening it, she turns the lever the opposite way. David is confused. Then Miranda realizes what she's doing. Ekaterina isn't trying to save herself. She's sacrificing herself. She knows Calvin is still attached to her suit. If she enters the station, the creature enters too. Choosing the crew over her own life, she deliberately locks herself outside. Moments later, the coolant completely fills her helmet. Ekaterina drowns. David and Miranda can do nothing but watch as her body slowly drifts away into space. For a brief moment, it seems her sacrifice worked. Then Calvin detaches from her body and leaps back toward the station. David breaks down in frustration. Everything they do only seems to make the creature stronger. Trying to restore morale, Hugh argues that Calvin must be dead. No living organism could survive prolonged exposure to open space. But Sho isn't convinced. He points out that Calvin might still find a way back inside through the station's thruster systems. The crew immediately begins monitoring the thrusters. Every time they detect a temperature change suggesting Calvin's presence, Sho fires the engine. Again and again, they blast the thrusters. Unfortunately, the constant firing creates a new problem. The station begins drifting off course. Sho is eventually forced to use the remaining fuel reserves to stabilize the orbit, but during the chaos, Calvin succeeds in sneaking back aboard once again. The alien is inside the station. As the situation grows increasingly hopeless, Hugh makes a disturbing realization. Perhaps Calvin's species once ruled Mars millions of years ago. Then, when the Martian atmosphere collapsed, the creatures simply entered hibernation and waited. That idea inspires a desperate plan. If Calvin survived by entering hibernation, perhaps they can force it to do so again. The crew decides to recreate the conditions of a dead planet. They retreat into a single module, seal themselves inside, and vent oxygen from the rest of the station. If Calvin needs oxygen to remain active, depriving it of air might shut it down. The survivors move into the secure compartment and seal every hatch behind them. As they wait, Miranda notices Hugh growing weaker. The scientist blames himself for everything that has happened. But David reminds him that bringing Calvin aboard wasn't his decision alone. It was a choice the entire crew made together. Hugh sadly shakes his head. He explains that Calvin isn't evil. It's simply trying to survive. And unfortunately, survival for Calvin means death for everyone else. Moments later, Hugh loses consciousness. As David and Miranda try helping him, Miranda notices something moving beneath Hugh's skin. Slowly, she unzips his pant leg. What she sees is horrifying. Calvin is feeding on Hugh's leg. Everyone immediately jumps back. Miranda grabs a defibrillator and shocks the creature. But instead of harming Calvin, the electricity merely gets its attention. Now the alien is fully awake. The survivors scatter in panic. During the chaos, Sho becomes trapped inside the station's sleeping quarters. Meanwhile, David and Miranda return to Hugh. It quickly becomes clear that he isn't going to survive. While monitoring the station, David notices something unexpected on a holographic tracking display. He can see Calvin moving through the station. Then he realizes why. At some point, Calvin accidentally swallowed Hugh's tracking beacon. For the first time, they can monitor the alien's location in real time. Using this advantage, David and Miranda seal themselves inside a secure compartment and begin venting oxygen from the rest of the station. At first, the plan appears successful. Calvin begins suffocating. Then, another warning suddenly appears. A spacecraft is approaching. The survivors rush to the window and watch as a Soyuz capsule docks with the station. Sho believes rescue has finally arrived, but Miranda reveals the horrifying truth. The Soyuz was never sent to save them. It was sent to stop them. If the situation became uncontrollable, the spacecraft would push the station into deep space, ensuring Calvin could never reach Earth. It's humanity's final containment protocol. Unfortunately, Sho never hears the full explanation. Believing help has arrived, he leaves his safe compartment and rushes toward the Soyuz as he struggles to open the hatch. Calvin silently appears behind him. David and Miranda race to warn him, but they're too late. Through the window, they watch the cosmonauts inside the Soyuz being devoured. Sho desperately tries to escape. Then disaster strikes. The Soyuz breaks away from the station. The seal between the two spacecraft fails. Explosive decompression tears through the station. Everything begins getting sucked into space. SHO loses his grip and starts being pulled toward the opening. Then Calvin grabs onto his leg and starts climbing toward Miranda. Realizing he has one final chance to help, Sho makes a heroic decision. He grabs Calvin and allows himself to be dragged away. Together, both of them are sucked into space. Sho sacrifices his life to save the others, but somehow, Calvin still survives. The creature manages to cling to the station's exterior. David pulls Miranda to safety and seals the hatch just in time. Around them, the station begins falling apart. Panels tear loose. Debris flies in every direction. And then David notices something terrifying. The chaos has pushed the station into a decaying orbit. They have less than 30 minutes before re-entry, and their oxygen supply is running dangerously low. With no other options remaining, David comes up with one final plan. Calvin constantly seeks oxygen, so maybe oxygen can be used as bait. David decides to lure the creature into one of the escape pods and launch himself into deep space with it. Miranda will take the second pod and return to Earth. Someone has to survive and warn humanity. The plan is set into motion. Carrying an oxygen candle, David carefully moves through the wrecked station. As expected, Calvin follows the oxygen source. Whenever the creature gets close, David uses another oxygen candle to draw it farther along the path. Step by step, he leads Calvin exactly where he wants it. Finally, David reaches the escape pod. Calvin rushes inside and wraps itself around him. At the same moment, Miranda reaches the second pod. Both launch successfully. As the two capsules drift apart, Miranda records a final message. In her black box recording, she warns Earth that all Martian life should be considered extremely dangerous if Calvin ever reaches the planet. Humanity must use every available means to destroy it. But fate has one final twist. As both escape pods travel through space, they collide with debris. Critical systems begin malfunctioning. Inside his pod, David struggles to maintain course while Calvin coils around his arm. The creature tightens its grip. David screams in agony. Meanwhile, Miranda's navigation system also begins failing. Neither pod is heading where it's supposed to go. Slowly, the capsules drift farther and farther apart. One begins descending toward Earth. The other disappears deeper into space. Eventually, the descending pod crashes into the ocean. Nearby fishermen witness the landing and rush to investigate. When they peer through the window, they see David inside, or at least what's left of him. His body is now covered in Calvin's flesh-like tendrils. The fishermen immediately begin working to open the capsule. David desperately tries warning them not to, but they can't hear him. More fishing boats begin arriving, more people gather around the pod, and far away in space, Miranda helplessly drifts deeper into the darkness. As the hatch slowly begins to open, the fishermen unknowingly move closer to disaster, and with it, the possible end of all life on Earth.
And that's a wrap on today's recap. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a plot twist. Got a movie you want recapped? Drop it in the comments below. This is DX Recap. See you in the next one.